Charlie Sykes. Welcome back to another episode of To the Contrary podcast. There is so much going on. We are joined by my good friend, Olivia Troye. Welcome back, Olivia, first of all.
Thank you, Charlie. Good to be back with you.
Okay, so we're going to talk about what's been going on, what happened in Minnesota, what's going on with Israel, Iran, and Donald Trump, his latest flip-flops on the mother of all tacos, involving workplace deportations and raids. But let's just talk about what you were doing this morning, because you've had an extraordinary experience. So just tell us about that, please.
Yeah, so I have been attending immigration court hearings. So I was there for several hours this morning, watching a close family friend of mine live this firsthand as we watch what's going to happen to her family member who is currently waiting removal proceedings. And I have to say, just, never in a million years, you have Mike Pence's former Homeland Security advisor sitting here in immigration
You.
court observing, yeah, me, these families, but I just felt like it was important to really understand and really see firsthand what's really going on here. And Charlie, I can't describe what the feeling is to watch these families going through this, to hear the stories about children who have special needs, who are wondering if they're about to lose a parent, lose income, just the whole setup of how does this family continue on. And one of the things that struck me during it, not to ramble on, was
Mm.
some of the judges' questions and the way ICE attorneys or the people presenting the case were obviously they're focused. You're a gang member, you're this. I mean, they just rattle off accusations, and then the people are forced to scramble and defend it. In some cases, what I saw was that they don't know what is going to be presented until the day of when they have certain
Hmm.
hearings. So then you have these families who, some of them, I mean, it's hard. You have to pay for legal representation, right? So you have to pay to
Yes.
be represented in this courtroom, pay to fight for your mom or your dad or your spouse, brother, sister. And also just kind of struck me like, what is the future going to look like with all these kids who are going through this right now, who are younger, who have special needs or are watching this? Like, what is that generation going to look like for America? The aftermath of all of this, when this period hopefully passes someday, where we're moving past it. But honestly, Charlie, that was one of the things that I kept thinking about all morning.
So at least in these courtrooms, you're having some you're having due process, but does it always matter what happens in the courtroom? Because I'm seeing all of these stories of people who go into the courtroom and are released, by the judge, and then seized in the hallways by ICE agents. I mean, this is what
Yeah.
there's several things that have been really shocking recently. I mean, number one is the number of people who are grabbed outside the courtroom, and basically it doesn't matter what happens in the immigration courtroom. The fact that we have these pictures of these masked agents, which again, in
Yes.
the United States of America, I know that we've been numbed by so many things, but it is appalling. And of course, in just the last couple of days, we've had the arrest, the manhandling, the handcuffing of a United States senator in New York. You had the city controller, who's a candidate for mayor, who showed up at one of these hearings, a hearing very much like the one you're describing, and he's in the hallway, and he's arrested by ICE agents who said that he assaulted them. There's videotape showing he didn't, and he's making the point, you don't have the authority to arrest an American citizen. So give me your sense of what's happening, because if there was if anyone believed that ICE might have been embarrassed or shamed by
No.
the reaction to the manhandling of Senator Padilla, they're not. My sense is you're going to see a lot more of this, that they feel really emboldened.
Oh, absolutely. I think that that was the tone throughout the morning. And this is my second hearing that I've attended. In both hearings, honestly, in the aftermath of it, when they're over, we look at each other and we say, does this really matter? I mean, and we're
Yeah.
going through the
Okay.
due process right now, but it feels like it is pre-baked. This is what it is. And it's also lawlessness. And look, and in this situation, I know firsthand, this person was picked up on the way getting ready to go to work. This person owns their
Hmm.
own company. Five
Mm-hmm.
unmarked cars pulled up in front of their
Mm-hmm.
house unexpectedly.
Five
Five,
unmarked cars.
five,
Okay.
five.
Mm-hmm.
I watched the camera, the ring camera footage,
Mm-hmm.
because it was through the ring camera that we found out that he had been taken away because they left the truck running and they just
Oh,
took him. And in the video, it's chilling because you can hear the individual saying, "Call my lawyer. I need to talk to my lawyer. Can I tell my family? Can I see my son, who's a toddler?" None of that happens. He gets turned around, handcuffed, thrown in the car, and no showing of warrant, no IDs. I I I literally found the entire time watching it. I rewatched that. I still rewatch it because it's so astounding, and to know the person in that video and think that this is happening across our country, right? And the fact that like now we have senators getting arrested. I mean, it's just so horrific that this is where we are as a nation. And I do think that a lot of these people are emboldened now. They think they're above the law for ICE officers to behave this way. And the other side of it to me is the incredibly damaging effect that this is going to have on law enforcement, on other overall missions of the Homeland Security enterprise that Homeland Security investigations does, right? I mean, they're supposed to be focused on countering child trafficking, human trafficking, other missions like that. But this is destroying any credibility or public trust that we have with law enforcement and these agencies when they're going around doing these types of things. Because why would anyone trust them? Why would anyone
well, that
trust like who's showing up at your door if you're masked up? How do I know? How do I know that you're ICE? How do I know that you're not a militia? Why should I trust you? I mean, it's all these layers in society. I mean, what do you think
well, I
about that?
mean,
Like,
well, and you bring up what happened over the weekend in Minnesota. I mean, this is a digression. I want to get back to the immigration issue, where you had somebody who dressed up as a police officer, impersonated a police officer, and then murdered, a state legislator, and tried to murder another one. And police were in the position of saying, don't answer your door unless you verify the identity of a police officer. If anything, this should have underlined the importance of why government agents need to identify
yes.
themselves. And when people ask for identity, that is a legitimate question to do. Okay, so we'll talk about that a little bit later. But also in the last couple of days, what we've had is Donald Trump very explicitly saying that he wants to target democratically controlled cities, that he's going after Chicago and New York. It is as if the mask is being taken off and saying we are going to politicize the enforcement of immigration law, which again, 5 minutes ago would have been considered a breathtakingly illegal, unconstitutional abuse of power. And yet it's now just one part of the news cycle.
I don't think they care. I think that
Mm.
again, I think that they are going to do this in every pillar topic that we think of, right? I mean, you politicize immigration, you politicize FEMA, you politicize disaster relief. This
Yeah.
is how the Trump team operates. And I think, he, when they say things, we should believe them, right? That's the
Yeah.
lesson
Yeah.
that we've all learned in this
Well,
is that they ran on this and here we are. But I think it is undermining of our Constitution and our rule of law over and over again.
but I think it's also important to say, again, what happened in Los Angeles was the fight that Donald Trump wanted. I mean, he wanted that
Yes,
that confrontation. He wanted, frankly, he was hoping to have the images of the burning cars. Donald
100%.
Trump wants. So, what do you think? I mean, when he says, we're going to go into cities like New York and Chicago, other democratically controlled, he wants confrontation. He wants riots, right? He's
Oh, yes.
baiting people into acts of violence so that he can then use that as a pretext for what?
Well, I think it's all setting the narrative of Donald Trump is the only one who can bring law and order to the country. And he is the one that's actually creating the chaos and the instability across our country, right? But it allows him to bait people, it allows him to paint these Democratic leaning cities and say, this is what the country looks like under Democrats,
Yeah,
even
yeah.
though he is the one that's going in and instigating things. And look, I know this because it's the same playbook that they did in 2020, right? And I've talked about this where
Mm,
they went into these cities. It was the summer of 2020, and they wanted to instill fear in suburban country like counties. They wanted to instill fear in Americans that were watching this. And so they would sit there and say, make false claims about Antifa. They would
mm,
downplay the domestic terrorism, which we're seeing firsthand play out right now, especially in Minnesota, and political violence and things like that. They would discount whatever was happening in the far right wing operations that we were seeing on the ground. And I know this because we weren't allowed to talk about those assessments. We weren't allowed to publish those types of assessments. And so they wanted people to go into these communities. I mean, they wanted Mike Pence to go into Minnesota
mm-hmm.
during the height of the riots, and they wanted to stir the pot. And I was like, honestly, it was a very honest conversation where I was like, nothing good will come of that. Is that what
Yeah.
you want to do to our country?
Well, it is what he wants to do to the country, and the fact that in Kenosha, in my home state, you had
Yes.
Trump actually come here, and I think quite frankly, the fallout from that, almost won Wisconsin for Donald Trump. I think that there was a narrative that this wasn't working for him, and I'm not sure that that's true. I think he's been hoping for something similar. So let's talk about the mother of all tacos. Trump always chickens out. We're still on immigration here, not on tariffs. The very weird flip flop, and because there were multiple flip flops, where he announced that we were hurting the agriculture industry and the hospitality industry, and that these may be illegal immigrants, but they were the good ones, and therefore he was stopping the workplace raids for farms and for hotels like the ones he operates and everything. First of all, why do you think he did that? And then why did he back off again? I mean, this was so weird. I mean, there's a story in the New York Times this morning. Businesses just can't figure out what's going on. It's like one day they announce we're not enforcing it, and then the next day they announce they are enforcing it. What's going on here, Olivia?
It's been interesting to watch this because when I was there in my tenure during the first Trump administration, I got a lot of the phone calls from the farmers,
Mm-hmm.
whether it was on immigration raids, which they were like,
Mm-hmm.
what is happening here? You're actually hurting us, and we voted for you, right? Those were the
Mm-hmm.
kinds of phone calls I was getting as a Homeland Security
Yeah.
advisor. I also got the phone calls on tariffs. We're not going to get into that, but boy, did they raised hell on that because they were like, "You're hurting us. We are your voting block. You're hurting us again." Not everyone voted from the farms, but you know what I'm saying. And I think watching this play out, I was like, I can only imagine that people are saying you're hurting the economy. By the way, by doing this, that's what's going to be the impact to communities. And so what are you doing? You're not focusing just on the gang
But
members
this
so
was
that you
this was
say,
this was
right?
known. I mean, this was known. Anybody who's been
Absolutely.
around these things,
Yes.
and yet Stephen
Yes.
Miller and Donald Trump decided, despite all of that evidence. I mean, this is not a
I don't
new issue,
care.
as you point out, that we've been talking about this for decades. So I guess
Yes.
the question is, why did he back off, sort of at the moment of maximum confrontation? I mean, was it just simply Trump always chickens
I,
out? Somebody comes up to him at Mar-a-Lago and says, dear Mr. Trump, with tears in their eyes, sir, this is hurting the agriculture industry. I guess what I thought was really on display is that there is no such thing as Trumpism as a principle
oh
or
yeah.
a consistent principle. Now, Stephen
100%.
Miller has a very, very consistent point of view, but Donald Trump just blows with the wind. And Donald Trump, and again, these are not obscure facts that these raids would damage these industries. And yet, so there's there's
Yeah.
there's no lodestar for Donald Trump. He will throw anyone under the bus, or he will give out fear or favor. So why do you think he backed off then? Okay, so having done this, having having
Right.
having given this sweet deal to agriculture and hospitality, why then did he reverse? Because I mean, that didn't look good. I mean, what,
No.
so you know, so what
Well,
happened?
no, I
Stephen
think you're
Miller came into the office and said, "You're looking weak, Mr. President. We have to go
yeah.
and we have to smash these people."
I actually do think that it's Stephen Miller. I think what
Okay,
happens
well,
is that Trump does listen to people, as you know, the last person in his ear, sometimes he repeats whatever he heard. And I think he gets swayed by people when they weigh in. And it wouldn't surprise me if behind the scenes in the White House, which I've lived this and saw, that there are people being like, hey, this is actually not going to help you. This is creating some significant problems across the board, and it could impact other things that
Yeah,
we haven't serviced or haven't figured out yet. And I can see Stephen Miller letting that sort of play out and then coming in and closing the door and being like, what the hell are you doing? This is America first. This is the agenda we ran on. You are the immigration king. We need to deport all these people. I mean, I can totally see that being the case. And in the end, Stephen Miller, with the type of power that he has, unfortunately, and bullying everyone because that's what he does, the last person in his ear, in Trump's ear, is usually who wins. And so I think that is kind of what I saw in the past 24 hours. Like, oh, okay, somebody, must have talked common sense, but
hmm,
how is he going to respond? And what is Stephen Miller going to say about this? And MAGA, right? Because a lot of these people are egging him on. And so then they're turning on him and they're like, oh, he's turning on us. So a lot of that, and Stephen Miller will walk in and set the record straight. And I think we're living
I think you're
Stephen
right.
Miller policies right now. That's what I think it
No,
is.
I think you are. Okay, so let's switch gears to talk about what happened in Minnesota over the weekend. Now, there's a
Horrible.
pattern that I think is really important to note, which is that you have an incident that can be bad, but the reaction in many ways is even more disturbing. And now let me just
Yes.
put that in context. So, the manhandling of a United States senator, watching Senator Padilla being thrown to the ground and handcuffed, that was bad. That was shocking. The reaction, I thought, was even more ominous, because what you could see is that MAGA loved it. They wanted more of it. They justified it, and you in fact are going to see more of that. Okay, so let's leave that aside. Much more serious is what happened over the weekend. You have this targeted assassination. I mean, there's no lack of clarity about what was going on here. You have a Trump supporting right wing zealot who made a list of Democratic legislators in Minnesota and in my home state of Wisconsin that he was targeting for assassination. He planned it very carefully. He, shot and killed a former
Hmm.
Speaker of the House, and her husband, and a state senator, which, by the way, would have flipped control of the state legislature, leaving that aside. Okay, this was horrible and horrific, and normally this would be one of those moments when it would pull people together. I want to focus on the reaction to it. First of all, the first day, all of the MAGA influencers, Elon Musk, Mike Lee, essentially
Yep.
trying to politicize this, flooding the zone with disinformation that this was probably a leftist. And then just kind of the lack of empathy that you're getting from the very top. So, I mean, you have these horrific events that are, and people, we need to focus on them. But I also think the the coarsening of our culture and just the total lack of empathy in the response is I think even more troublesome. Well, as troublesome.
Oh, it
Your
was
thoughts?
ugly. Oh, it was absolutely ugly to see the fact that there was absolutely just no human reaction by some of these individuals. That it was
Hmm.
immediately Marxist, leftist, like immediate, no facts involved, no real, let me see what this is and plays out. No real moment of violence is wrong, no matter what, no matter who
Yeah.
it comes from.
Well, there
You know,
was
I
there was sort of the boilerplate, but then there was the Mike Lee. This is what Marxists do.
that
Donald
was
Trump
awful.
asked, "Are you going to call Tim Walz?" Did you see his response? He was asked on Air Force One, "Would you call the governor of Minnesota?" No, I'm not going to call him. He's a bum. He's incompetent. It is the it is the it feels like just I've been thinking about the 10 years of Donald
Mhm.
Trump, and what he's done, not just to our politics, but to our culture and to our humanity. And I think that you just see this playing out. And it's like you've been dealing with Homeland Security for years.
Yeah.
The climate that we've created of considering your political opponents to be scum and vermin and vile and terrorists and communists who hate America and are trying to destroy everything that is good and beautiful. How do we think that does not lead to acts of violence. And we've seen so many. I mean, we keep talking about, will there be political violence? There has been political violence.
Yes.
January 6th, the attack on Josh Shapiro, the attempt to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer, fire bombings. We are living in an incredibly dangerous moment, aren't we?
Yes, and it is this type of rhetoric that has perpetuated it and grown this type of violent movement in our country. And they know it,
Yeah.
Charlie. They know it, right? I mean, I was there when I briefed the guy that was sending the pipe bombs to people, to all the Democrats and the media. And he had
Mm-hmm.
a van full of Trump paraphernalia and had gone to the Trump
Was it Caesar
rallies. I
Sayoc,
mean,
right?
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Mm-hmm.
fully aware of it. They knew about the manifestos. This guy had a hit list in Minnesota. Same thing. I mean, manifestos. Like, same thing happened when I worked the Pittsburgh shooting, right? The synagogue shooting. Same thing with El Paso. And they were told that
Okay.
this type of reaction
Pass them.
was only going to fuel worse violence. And this is
And
Trump team's first time around. And here we
okay.
are today. What did they
Okay.
learn from it? Nothing. They see this as an opportunity to punch at people politically. Everything to them is another opportunity to take a swing and get a rise from their base instead of actually taking a step back and saying what is best for the greater good of America and for the safety of all Americans, because that's what's happening here. But they don't care. They don't care, Charlie. It's about creating this division again that allows
But
them to exploit this division.
are they actually, though, exploiting the fear? Because I think it's impossible to describe the politics that we have right now, the political moment that we have right now,
Yeah.
without talking about the fact that people are fearful. Remember when Senator Murkowski said, that too many people are
Yes.
afraid, and she specifically was not just talking about being primaried, but physical fear. So this atmosphere of menace, are they actually, is this a subconscious or is this a conscious thing that, you know, we kind of like the fact that people are fearful, they're looking over their shoulders because of the potential of violence. I mean, this is a
Yeah.
serious charge. I mean, I understand this is a very
Yes.
serious charge, that they are actually using this, and they like the fact that people are concerned like this.
Well, I think it speaks to their want of control. That's how
Mhm.
I view it from my angle, is looking at the totalitarian instincts of creating this fear means that they control the state. And I think it's creating fear across the board in society.
This
And
is a
I
new
think it
level of
all kind
evil,
of plays
though.
in hand.
Yeah, but
It
this is a
is.
new
And
level of evil.
it
I mean,
is.
this is we keep talking about this is not normal. We're not in a normal world. But if in fact there's even a glimmer of truth in what I am, asking about here, that at some point they go, you know what? I like the fact that people are afraid that somebody might show up at their house, that if they say something or do something, that something might
Yeah.
happen to them. This is something that we've never had, I don't think, in American politics before, certainly not in my lifetime, that you would actually have the weaponization of physical fear to gain political power. I mean, that is off the charts,
Well,
Olivia.
I I think that we are dealing with some very abhorrent personalities here, Charlie. And I think to me, there was nothing more chilling when Trump was told that Mike Pence's life was in danger and he didn't
Yes.
care. And I think that basically sums up the moment that we're in. So I don't
Defining
ever
moment.
expect Donald Trump to change course in how he responds to these things. I think the question is, uh, you know, can the Mike Lees be pushed out or away and overcome by others in the Republican Party who are going to say, enough, we're not going to do this and band together and where Democrats and Republicans come together? Because it's not going to be just the Democrats trying to figure out how to navigate the space, right? It has to
Right.
be everyone across the board that is going to want to
Yes.
come together and say, this is not okay.
You make a really good point when you talk about that defining moment, that when Donald Trump is told that his own vice president, his loyal vice
Yeah.
president, his life and the life of his family might be at risk, and he frankly didn't give a shit about it. But it goes back to the whole meaning of January 6th, which we've talked about endlessly, but it's worth really thinking about what the meaning of January 6th was, because that was quite clearly, literally, the
Yes.
weaponization of political violence in order to maintain power. And the fact that Donald Trump did it, that he justified it, that in fact he pardoned, the rioters who attacked police officers. If there's any question, why has political violence become a factor in American politics, part of the equation of American politics? You don't really need to look much past January 6th. It's staring us right in the face that this is what Donald Trump is capable of doing, prepared to do, and liked, in fact, doing. And he's still, to this day, look, the
Yes.
of all the things that have happened, the mass pardoning of all of the January 6th rioters, including the ones who attacked and tased, and pummeled, and may have led to the deaths of police officers, ought to have shocked the conscience of the nation. And unfortunately, it didn't. And so here we are.
No, I think that pardon sent a complete major signal to some of these
Yeah.
individuals who might engage in this type of violence that it's okay, right? That if you do it in the name of our politics, or if you do it in the name of Trump, or if you're doing it for the cause that is aligned with theirs, that it's okay, that you'll walk. I mean, that's basically
Well,
what was said.
yeah, and I've said this before. I mean, look, we need to understand that a lot of these people actually think that they are fighting for freedom and democracy, right? That this is
100%. Yep.
1776, that they are the true patriots. If you actually believe that the opposition, Democratic legislators in Wisconsin and Minnesota, are the enemy who are trying to destroy democracy and freedom in America, then it is sort of legitimizing taking up arms against them. Okay, so Olivia, talk to me about Mike Lee. Talk to me about I am I keep coming back to this theme about the broken brains of MAGA. Mike Lee, and and as I've said, as a constituent of Ron Johnson, I hesitate to throw stones at the senators from other states. But Mike Lee was at one time considered a serious guy. They talked about him for being as a possible Supreme Court
Yeah.
justice or attorney general. You may have disagreed with him, but he was a principled libertarian. What happened to him that he has become this toxic internet troll who needed to be shamed into taking down his stupid tweets about the assassinations over the weekend?
Yeah, the fall of Mike Lee has been interesting to watch. I think I think this is what happens when you enter Trump's circle. I think, he's gone down the rabbit hole. He's been there. I mean, this guy was the one that was sending the Jan 6 text. He was all about overturning the election. He was all
Yeah,
about it, right? I mean, there's the thread again, back to Jan 6, whether we want to go
yeah,
back to that and talk about that or not. He played a very active role during that
yes,
time until he realized, that these texts obviously, he probably wouldn't have written them if he knew they would come out. But like that to me said everything
yeah.
right then and there again. So I'm not surprised. I mean, I thought it was disgusting when he posted the Nightmare on Waltz Street, right,
Oh God,
picture. And I mean, this was a brutal, horrific
you're
tragedy that just
joking.
happened.
You're
Yeah,
joking. I
and
mean,
it's not
I
funny
no, it's not
at all.
funny. And I thought one of the positive, since I've emphasized the negative, one of the positive results of this was that he, in fact, was apparently successfully shamed. You had the actual confrontation from Tina Smith, who is his colleague, a
Yes.
senator from Minnesota. Amy Klobuchar from Minnesota, got in his face and talked to him. One of the top aides in Tina Smith's office wrote an amazing letter, which I posted on my Substack, to Mike Lee's staff, basically saying, have you no decency? Have you no compassion? Why
Yes.
did you do this? Why would you use the power of your office to, make light of this particular moment? And it was one of those. And again, you say this is what happens when you get in Trump's circle. Okay, I get all that,
Yeah.
and I've seen this happen. I've seen the invasion of the body snatchers, but it's how do you take someone like a Mike Lee? And I mean, what happened to his fundamental humanity and decency? I guess, which of course assumes that it was there in the in the first place, that something changed. Maybe Trump just simply exposes the dark recesses of the soul, as opposed to
I,
actually dementing people.
I've been wondering that with a lot of these people in Trump's circle that continue to get worse and worse along the way is um, maybe this is really who they are and
Yeah,
who they were back then. They just were contained. And I just wonder for his constituents, for Mike Lee's constituents,
in Utah.
are you okay with that? Is what I would ask. Like, do you feel good about that? Do you feel good about backing someone like that that makes statements in situations like this? And I wonder the reaction if the shoe was on the other foot, right? I mean, if it was a different person. And it would be hell raising across the board in unity. And I wonder, like, does this eventually permeate through American society and to the voters out there to be like, I don't want that person to represent me. I may be
Yeah.
conservative, I may believe in certain conservative policies, but will they say, hey, there's got to be better options in there if I'm going to vote Republican? There's someone else that's normal that's not going to do
They
this.
just
But then
reelected
again,
Donald Trump. I
right.
mean, this is the electorate. I actually, what I've noticed in the last 10 years since Trump came down the golden escalator is how sort of the opposite has happened. Again, the coarsening of the debate, the willingness to engage in this. And then here's this other cancer at the heart of MAGA and of Trumpism, which is the absolute refusal to ever apologize. Because you think about, again, Earth 1.0, a rational universe, if you don't recognize Senator Padilla and you throw him to the ground, you apologize. You say there was a misunderstanding. We didn't mean to do that. But there's no apology. Mike
No.
Lee could have said, okay, I got some bad information. This was a bad moment. I am so sorry. He'd get on the phone. He would call people. But MAGA does not allow that, does it? MAGA has now basically said, never say you were wrong, never apologize, never back off. So the toxification becomes intensified.
And I think that's what we're seeing that permeates across the board,
Yeah.
unfortunately. Right? I mean, we're seeing it. It's the division that we're seeing in our families and in our neighborhoods
Yeah.
and I mean, we're seeing this in our circles of friendship where people are entrenched. And I think the
Yeah.
leadership and the example comes from the top, as we know.
I no, I totally agree. Okay, so let's talk about the biggest story of the day, which is obviously the possibility the United States will join, or maybe not, join with Israel in the attack on Iran. I wrote yesterday. There's the fog of war, and then there is this. Um, this war may or may not eliminate Iran's nuclear capability. It may or may not result in regime change. The United States may or may not join in this. All we know is that you have the president of the United States tweeting out these all caps, unconditional surrender. It's an
Yeah.
incredibly dangerous moment. And you have a huge split in the MAGA universe over all of this. I mean, there are some people who really thought America first meant isolationism, and the end of endless wars. So give me your sense of where we're at right now. Donald Trump came out yesterday and said, nobody knows what I'm going to do. I am, I don't know. What do you think about that? He's playing the madman theory, right? It's like, here's my strength. I'm going to look as crazy as possible and maybe scare the shit out of them. Well, there's a downside to the madman theory as well, right? I mean, it doesn't always work out.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned that because watching this play out, I immediately thought back to the election cycle in the 2024 campaign where I heard that from some people out on the field when I was talking to Republican voters, and they said, well, I think the crazy is it. I think that's what keeps us out of conflict because the other countries
Mm-hmm.
think that he's so nuts that he might actually contain them. So that's part of the
Yeah.
strategy. And I was like, no, once you work with him and you see him firsthand, you realize that that is actually there is no strategy and it's actually dangerous, especially when the rest of the world is starting to build alliances, which we're seeing now because they can't trust the United States because we're so volatile in the way we behave when it comes to diplomacy and foreign policy. And so when I heard him say that statement, nobody knows what I'm doing. I'm like, you don't even know what you're going to do. It depends on what the last thing you hear in the room is, or it depends on what side of the bed you wake up on today. I mean, it's neurotic and it's sporadic. And I have to say, like, watching what's happening right now in this moment, I'm terrified, Charlie, because I'm visualizing the situation room and the personality sitting at that
Look
table.
around. There are no adults in that room.
Exactly. I mean, the leadership at the helm is utter less. I mean, I am very worried because this is a significant moment in the Middle East in escalation, and we have very inexperienced people that are sitting here trying to navigate a very complicated situation. And I think Israel knows exactly what they're doing. I mean, they've kind of sort of cornered Donald Trump, right? I mean, they're our ally.
Yeah.
Donald Trump has stood by them. They've really
Mhm.
backed Trump into a corner from what I watched this, because now they're like, all right, let's go. Prove
Well,
yourself now.
it was interesting. It was very, very clear that the Trump didn't want this to happen, was not really involved in all of this. They actually put out a statement after the first attacks, where Marco Rubio did, says we are not part of this at all. And then Trump sees on Fox News that it looks like a success, and because he loves, leading from behind, he comes running up and saying, no, 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 we're part of this as
Hmm.
well. It is interesting that among all the people in the world that kind of get Donald Trump, you don't, a lot of Republicans I don't think get him, or business executives that cave into him. Vladimir Putin gets him. Benjamin Netanyahu gets
Absolutely.
him, which is basically, we can play this guy, and Benjamin
Yep.
Netanyahu played him. But this is, again, I come from a different, I mean, well, I come from a, you know, I have been traditionally for decades been pro-Israel. However, I don't think that Benjamin Netanyahu now deserves the benefit of the doubt, or as a reliable narrator. I think the world would be a much, much better place if Iran did not have nuclear weapons. I think the world would be a better and safer place if we did have regime change. However, it's very, very dangerous, and what comes afterwards could, in fact, be worse, which means that right now, at this moment, you want the smartest, most sober, most prudent, most
Yes.
statesmanlike, military and diplomatic people in that room. That is not what we have. What we have is, we have a reality TV host and a dipsomaniacal chode in charge of the military. What could possibly go wrong? By the way, what's going on with Tulsi Gabbard? So Tulsi Gabbard has been thrown under the bus. I mean, you want to talk about like the worst of the worst who may actually be right? She testifies that they weren't coming up with a nuclear
Yeah.
weapon. I don't know whether she's right or not. I think she's one of the worst members of the cabinet. She's not even invited to the meetings anymore. Trump basically says, I don't care what she says. So she's
Well,
on
he
the
doesn't care
outs.
about intelligence. That's the problem, though. Right?
That's the
That's
problem.
actually the bottom
That's
line.
it.
He doesn't. He doesn't care what the intelligence community says. He never has. And when they do present facts with actual evidence and lay out the case for yes or no, or right or wrong, or what's truly happening, he doesn't want to listen to it, or he
Yeah.
overrides it, or he changes the narrative, or he undermines the community, right? I mean, that is what he's known for. And so I think it doesn't surprise me that I mean, I'm wondering, is he actually taking the presidential daily briefing now when we're in the middle of potentially a full scale war that's about to blow up? Is he actually paying attention to the daily briefings? Who is actually coordinating that right now? And that's why I say, like, I am concerned about how this is going to progress. And I think he thinks that he's playing a game here where he can threaten and he can hold this over Iran's head and kind of say, "Oh, we're going to come after you," and do these veiled threats. Well, we need to be thinking about the potential consequences here, because they're not in this to play, and we need to be thinking about our equities overseas, our military bases, intel officers, service members, and also Iranian proxies that will be deployed in response, right? What is going to
Oh,
happen when they attack our critical infrastructure or cyber, through cyber attacks like around the world, like us? I mean, these are all the discussions that need to be war gamed right now, with serious people at the table being like, if you do this, this is what's going to come. And then we are in it again. I mean, so I just don't know. And I think about it. Look, I think about Keith Kellogg. Where is Keith Kellogg? He was over there negotiating with Ukraine. They
mhm.
pushed him aside when he was a little too honest. Keith Kellogg used to be one of the voices in the room where he was like, nope, really think it's a bad idea to go back and retaliate again against Iran. Like, and this is why. And cooler heads prevailed. I don't know who is in that role right now today.
Well, it doesn't. To your point, I mean, this is a very, very elaborate chess game. You have to think about what's the next move. What's the next
Yes.
move? Donald Trump may, be in the room and somebody says, we could use that bunker buster bomb and we could take this thing out and be focused on that. Well, okay, what is the next move? The move after that? The move after that? We have a lot of troops in the Middle East who are within missile range of the Iranians.
Yes.
The Iranians have made it very, very clear they would retaliate against American troops. You have the Houthis who could again start attacking shipping. We could have the Persian Gulf shut off again. What happens if Vladimir Putin airlifts a brigade of Russian troops into Tehran to support his ally there? what happens, what are the consequences? You, all of these things need to be considered, and the question is, who's going to be telling him, who is he listening to? Okay, so on this category of who does Donald Trump listen to, it's not just the people in the room. He could be on the phone, for all we know, with Laura Loomer, and by the way, that's not a joke. He could
No,
be
he
listening to
listens
all,
to her.
the
I mean,
craziest
he
people.
fired people. He fired people based on her, right? He fired
Right.
people on the National Security Council, who, by the way, I wish were at their desks right now
Would be
because,
valuable now.
yes, yeah. So I mean, he does
Okay.
listen to her. Is Steve Bannon calling the shots? Like who is doing the foreign diplomacy right now for the United States? And the other thing, just to color this strategically, globally, that I worry about is everyone else, the international community, is watching what the United States is going to do, right?
Oh yeah.
Especially. And are we going to laterally get involved with Israel? Because I think that has implications for other worldwide events. Like, I think other countries are looking at
Sure
this and
does.
saying, what happens with China and Taiwan? What will the US do then? Like,
Yes.
what is he? I mean, that is what the rest of the world is looking at right now, thinking, okay, now we're playing chess, and the United States is the unpredictable chess like token, right? We have no idea what this is going to do, how this is going to escalate. We have no idea how we're going to prepare for this. And it's telling. It's telling what does it mean for repercussions and other things.
Well, exactly. I mean, when you say, tweet out unconditional surrender, if in fact you do back off later, there are consequences of that. Okay, so you, I think, understand exactly what I'm getting at here when I say that normally I can make a reasonable prediction of who is going to influence Donald Trump. You look at the MAGA id, the loudest voices in MAGA, in MAGA media, and you could generally predict downstream what Trump is going to do. I have to admit that right now the signals are awfully mixed because this is a really dramatic split. You probably have seen, the back and forth between Sean Hannity the hawk, Tucker Carlson the dove. You have Steve. You
Yes.
mentioned Steve Bannon. You have a lot of the people like Steve Bannon and Marjorie Taylor Greene and the other America Firsters who are absolutely opposed to all of this. And Tucker Carlson seems to be doubling down. He's not as influential as he used to be. But how does this actually play out? Because we haven't. Trump has had one of his reptilian instincts is he's always paid attention to his base. He never does anything that separates him too significantly from his base. You look at the polls, you look at the voices, very much split. How does this play out, do you think? I have no idea
Well, I
actually
think
at the moment.
I actually am not sure because, he did run on a platform of no wars.
Yeah.
And what are we seeing? Nothing but conflict right now. So I don't know because he did, he said he criticized Biden when he was in the presidency. He said this
Mm,
sort of stuff wouldn't be happening
yeah.
because I would be strong and it's because we're weak. Well, what's the explanation right now then? Because now you're going to go in and purposely stir the pot. I mean, this is escalating. You've been negotiating with Iran for weeks for what? Nothing apparently. So I mean, like I don't know how this voting base and these influencers are going to sort of get to a I don't know, a resolution here. And I don't know who he will eventually, what side he'll fall on. I mean, I think we'll know fairly soon, but like, I think the thing was with Trump, he'll say things like no wars and he will say, no, we're not
Yeah.
going to have troops.
Yeah.
We're going to bring them all home. Right. But he loves strength. He loves using the
Yes.
military to
Let's
his
blowing
own
things up.
use.
Hmm.
He loves the show of it. Right. And so, I'm not convinced that he doesn't want to do just like in his head, just one strike to show the power of America.
Right.
Use that big bomb because we've never like used it. Like I totally think that that is the calculus with him right now, and
I
I
know.
think that
I
is
think it
hard to
is too.
counter.
It is, well, except that somebody's going to say, okay, that's going to be good for that news cycle, but then when the missiles start landing and killing American soldiers in the bases, what if the Iranians took out an aircraft carrier? What happens
Yes.
then? Do you remember what happened to Joe Biden when you had the bomb that went off in Kabul? This could
Yeah.
be your moment. Donald Trump is not the guy who is prepared to have that kind of pain. So,
Which is interesting because you literally just described a situation that I saw in the West Wing once, and that's how he was talked off the idea of escalating with Iran and the first time around. So I don't know who the person that
Yeah, who's
exists
going to
in
do
his
it?
orbit right now, who is going to play that role? That is the question.
Yeah, I mean that, but the thing is, again, what's he listening to? They're the people who are in the room. Nobody's going to, push back against him. But we know that Donald Trump is going to be watching on Fox News. He's going to be watching on social media. He may be, dissing Tucker Carlson, but he understands that there's a constituency there. And Steve Bannon, there's a constituency there. By the way, did you see the confrontation between Tucker Carlson and Ted Cruz?
Yes,
The extra.
that was insane.
I mean, well, this has become ugly and it's become personal. I mean, there are things that you do and there's things that I mean, here you have Tucker Carlson, Ted Cruz comes in, he figures he's going to have a debate. Ted Cruz is, a hawk. Tucker Carlson is obviously not. And he probably thinks he's going to have this interesting debate. And Tucker Carlson went out of his way to humiliate him. We've only seen excerpts, but this is one of those things where you walk out of the studio and you go, "What the fuck was that? What are you doing here?" I mean, you're this is there's broken bottles in the alley on all of this, and this is going to leave scars. And we haven't seen this kind of division in MAGA yet,
No,
really, so far.
no, that is true. And I wonder where this all leads to, because it kind of is sort of cultivating this environment that this is what happens now. This is how these people govern. It's just it's fights and it comes to blows and it's ugly. And so I don't know. I think this is an interesting scenario of the division that's happening in that world. But I do know that it is bad for the country though, because I'm wondering who's actually governing right now without these random things happening in these scuffles. And I just wonder who's actually governing and making sure that we are going to be safe as we navigate through a major conflict right now,
So
here, even in
I
the
heard
homeland.
I heard a rumor speaking about like who's governing, and maybe it was something I saw on social media, and I need to look it up. Um, that there is actually another branch of government in the federal government. Could you just correct me on this? That there is a Congress that actually has war powers and things like that.
Yes,
Are they like
yes.
are they going to play any role in this at all?
I would love to know that. I would love to know because I think that we should be having a hearing immediately right now and that they should be raising hell. I would think that they would want to exert their power and authority right now to figure out how
Yeah,
we're
you
going
would
to
think so.
navigate this. You would think. But
Yeah.
I mean, we've also seen them, sort of retreat on what happened to Alex Padilla. And I would think that they would want to preserve the institution and not let that happen to their people, regardless of where you are politically. That's not okay to have people like that arrested and forced to the ground and treated that way. But I think this is all part of a very different scenario that we have here in our country, in our country's leadership, where there honestly appears to be,
It's
whether
amazing.
it's fear, whether it's weakness across the board. But right now, I would say that we need you to step up. We need that branch to step up because this is a significant moment. It's serious.
Yeah, and again, you would think that they would do it, but as as they work so hard to turn themselves into potted plants, I don't see any change. So, what
Yeah.
else should we be keeping our eye on? And I ask this as someone who, like, I think everybody's in the same position. Is there's so much going on that there are major stories, major issues every day I think, you know what, I should be paying more attention to this, and yet we're constantly distracted by the distractions to the distractions to the bright shiny objects. So is there something else that we should be keeping an eye on right now in this particular flooded news zone?
I don't know. I mean, there's so much happening right now,
I
right?
know.
I mean, we're watching what's happening in the health space when it comes to vaccines. That's really
Oh my
concerning
God.
because the health of our country is at stake here. So there's that. I think I've actually written about this and I remain very concerned about privacy and what's happening here with a lot of the Doge stuff that happened in Palantir. And then there was an article
It's a huge
recently that
story.
talked about how airline data being sold in our
Yes.
passenger records information. That's something that completely, I think most people have missed. And I'm like, that's all part of the combination of privacy and information and access to itineraries on people. All of this is concerning at a
Very
level that I
concerning.
think people aren't paying attention to. But I think they're flooding the zone, right? And I think they operate that way. And so I think it's hard because we
Well,
have
those are two
what's happening
those
in
are two
LA. I mean,
great issues. I mean,
yes.
in a different universe, what RFK Jr. is doing to vaccines, doing to public health would be a dominant story. The attacks on privacy, the surveillance state, and by the way, I remember when conservatives actually were concerned about the government, being too powerful, and now
Yeah.
when you even
Well,
imagine the kind of
I'm still here.
information and how it could be abused. I
Yes.
there was a story I read last night about somebody. I think he was an Australian student who came back in the country, and the agents pulled him aside at the airport, and they had all of his social media posts. They knew everything that he had written or said about Israel
Yeah.
and Gaza and everything. And it's like that is just a fraction of what some of these folks. And by the way, what I feel really guilty about, I have not spent much time talking about what's in this big, beautiful bill, which is one of the most
Yes.
consequential
I was
pieces of
going to
legislation.
mention that.
I mean, leaving aside the massive transfer of wealth from the poor to the rich, leaving that aside, the restructuring of government, what it does to the courts, all of that stuff, and yet that's moving through. And every single day, I keep thinking, today's the day when I'm going to write about what's in this legislation and what the politics of this particular bill are, and then something happens that
Yeah.
no, and because something always
Yeah. I
happens,
mean,
right?
yes. I mean, some, elected leader gets thrown in handcuffs and we're
Yeah,
like, what is happening there? Or a US citizen gets arrested, or, the National Guard is being used, or the military is being sent in. I mean, there's just so much happening that it's hard to prioritize and figure out, like, okay, what should we highlight today? I
well,
face
and
the same struggle. And I laughed, by the way, so hard when you mentioned the
I know.
privacy and conservatives, because I was like, you're looking at one. I mean, I'm just like, of course that's my world. And
Well,
having worked in government for so long, I do have concerns about government overreach, because I think when the wrong people end up in power and it gets into the wrong hands, there's a lot of really bad stuff that they could do on it. And they fired the main general at the National Security Agency. And when that happened, to me, that was a huge alarm. And I talked to other people in national security and I said, look, am I off my rocker now? Am I seeing this right? Because I have really big concerns on this. People that had worked there, people that know the capabilities, were like, no, we should be very concerned about what they're doing to lay the groundwork here. So that's why I'm sitting here going, well, all of these things are playing out in daylight while we're watching things happen globally and
in daylight.
domestically and everything. There's also stuff happening behind the scenes that is happening openly. It's just not front and center, where we're like, hey, is anyone questioning that?
Yeah.
I mean, and honestly, if we're feeling that way, I guess my question is, what is Congress doing? Like, how are they approaching this? Because there should be hearings on it. We should be
Yeah.
having a hearing, by the way, on the fact that there's a inexperienced 22-year-old person running the office at DHS now that focuses on extremism and domestic incidents, given what we've just seen in Minnesota. So I want to know, when
You
is
think?
the questioning going to begin about, do we have the right people and the leaders at the helm, and ask these powerful questions, or ask what's happening? Why did the airline data get sold? And why is it being like obscured from the fact that government didn't know? I mean, there's all these things, but again, I
So
mean,
much.
every day
Well,
it's too
but you
much.
know what? It's interesting as we're talking about this. I think one of our failures as a civil society in politics has been our lack of imagination. That we have not been able
Yes.
to imagine the way in which these powers could be abused. A year ago, if we would have said some of these things would happen, we would have been accused of Trump derangement syndrome. And day after day, I'm basically saying you don't have to imagine it. Just look. Look what's happening right now. This is the reality
Yes.
today. And so we no longer have to do that. And many of the things that were simply theoretical, that seemed paranoid and extreme, are now just part of the daily news cycle. So
Yeah.
to the extent that there was any complacency about the health of American democracy or the constitutional republic. And by the way, I do think that the resistance needs to stop talking about democracy. Okay, I'm going to be misunderstood here. Um, the attack on democracy, because it's so much more than just democracy. It is, it is due process. It is freedom. It is, I mean, maybe we should start a movement. It's the freedom stupid. And those masked ICE agents, grabbing people off the street. This is not what freedom looks like. And we need
Yeah.
to take certain things back. We need to take the flag back from them. We need to take the word freedom back from them too. So a way for people
Yeah.
to conceive exactly what's happening.
Well, I attended the No Kings protest. I went
Mm-hmm.
there and covered it live locally because it was important for me to witness it firsthand. And that's one of the things that I kept telling people is that, like, I am, I'm proud. I'm a proud Mexican American. My mom is a Mexican immigrant.
Mm-hmm.
My dad was a lifelong, hardworking class truck driver. And what I said to people was like, bring your flag, bring the flag of your culture and everything, and bring the American flag too.
Mm-hmm.
Take back the flag from them, and because it is patriotism to be out there. It is
Mm-hmm.
patriotic to be out there advocating for due process, the rule of law, individual rights, just freedoms, as you put it, and be, standing up for your community, for others that are being like put through the ringer right now and standing by each other. But I didn't, and the reason I kept saying that was because I didn't want to give the Trump team the opportunity to exploit it. Right? They want
No,
those images where they don't
they
have the
do.
American flags and then they flash the Jan 6 flags and it's all American and MAGA and military flags. Like, they want that. And so the juxtaposition. So don't give it to them.
Right.
Don't
Don't
give it
give
to
it.
them, because
Don't
what
take
you're
the bait.
doing is you're standing up for America, because America is based, it was built by immigrants. Like, it is a country that is built on our freedoms and our First Amendment and all of these things. And so that to me is like, we are fighting for that. And that is what we're doing, right? And so I think in these moments, I think we kind of like want to make sure that we're not handing it over to them so easily and say, no, actually, we're going to flip the
Yeah.
script on you because I know what you want
Yeah.
us to do. Yeah.
Yeah, it's our effing flag. It's not your effing flag. The other day I saw, I saw, a pickup truck drive by and he's got two big American flags in the back. And my initial reaction was, okay, there's a MAGA guy. And I go, wait. How did the flag become a symbol of their
Right.
symbol?
Yeah.
And no, we cannot allow that to happen. Olivia, Troye, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for your time. It's been really an interesting conversation. I appreciate it. We have to have you back very, very soon. And again, make sure you look for Olivia's Substack and subscribe as quickly as possible. Thank you, Olivia.
Thank you, Charlie.
And thank you all for listening to this episode of To the Contrary podcast. We do this. You know why we do this. Because now more than ever, we have to remind ourselves that we are not the crazy ones.